Hey guys, Superior David here. I was going to make a deck guide this week, but I've had a lot of frustrations with Hearthstone lately, and I know a lot of people in the community have also had a lot of frustrations with the current state of the game. In my opinion, there's not just one problem with Hearthstone at the moment, but rather several that have compounded over the past year, and it's led to this really frustrating metagame that we find ourselves in at the moment. I'm really big on offering solutions to problems instead of just complaining about them, so that's what I'm going to try and do with this video. I'm going to offer 4 ways I think the Hearthstone dev team can improve Hearthstone in Ashes of Outland, so I hope you enjoyed the little change up here, and me and my beard will be back next week with some more deck guides. Starting off with a pretty popular sentiment in the community, I think that Demon Hunter needs to be nerfed again. The last round of nerfs, while totally welcome, didn't really address the biggest problem cards in Demon Hunter. Yes, Priestess of Fury really needed a nerf, but the Crimson Sigil run nerf was pretty out there in my opinion. And honestly, I'm not even really sure what the devs were thinking with the last balance patch because there was just no explanation to any of the nerfs or buffs in the patch notes. I understand why they wouldn't want to explain these things because, we'd nitpick the hell out of them, but I think a lot of people were just scratching their heads at the Demon Hunter nerfs or the lack thereof. I've made a whole video about Demon Hunter nerfs, so I don't want to go too in depth here, but I will say that after the latest bounce patch, it seems like the 2 biggest problem cards that lead to the most frustrating moments are Warglaze of Azeroth and Altruist the Outcast. So I'd love to see both of them just nerfed in some way. I think that most people would agree that Altruist needs to be limited to only hitting minions because it's not uncommon to get burst down from half life if your opponent has Twin Slices or they got cheap cycle cards off of Skull of Gul'dan. It's just not fun to play against, and I think it gives Demon Hunter just way too much burst and just pushes out too many decks. Warglaze of Azeroth is a card that I wasn't really sure how to nerf in my original video, but now I'm more on the side of reducing its durability from 4 to 3. So the Demon Hunter player has to actually choose between clearing off a minion or going face. Instead of now where it's hey, I'm just going to do everything because I'm a Demon Hunter. Some people want to change the effect to be triggered when the Demon Hunter attacks and kills a minion, which I think is a good change as well, but I think as long as Twin Slice is a card, there will always be a need to reduce the durability of this weapon. So I'm going to leave it at that, but check out my Demon Hunter video if you want to have a more in-depth look at Demon Hunter nerfs. And now we're moving on to a change that I think needs to happen, and that is getting rid of the effect to straight up reduce a card's mana cost to 0. While paying no mana for cards is a lot of fun, it's very powerful, and I think the devs have been way too liberal with adding mana cheating effects to the game, especially in the past year, to the point where we're going off the rails a bit, and it's often impossible to meaningfully interact with what your opponent is doing. People are quick to point this out with Rogue, with Galakrond and Togwaggle, and totally agree. Rogue really only sees play at the moment because it's able to have these powerful swing turns where they don't pay mana for cards, and I don't think that's good for the class. It's sort of like a substitute for an actual mechanical identity. Rogue isn't the only one that can reduce cards to 0 mana though. I'm sure many watching this video have been hit by a 0 mana Malygos from Quest Warlock and have felt very satisfied with that game. And even Spell Druid has its ramp payoff cards, Bogbeam and Ironbark, that reduce to 0 when they hit 7 mana, which really helps them abuse an on-curve exotic Mount Seller. But obviously, I think the biggest offender in Standard right now is clearly Dragon Queen Alex, which can easily cheat out 10 to 15 mana worth of stats, just easily the turn you play it. Of course, every class has access to Dragon Queen Alex, which further makes it just a frustrating card that you've played against way more than you'd like to. So what I'd really like to happen overall with the game is to make all these 0 mana cost reductions instead reduce the cost to 1 mana. If you've watched the stream at all, I'm a really big advocate of this. A change like this seems innocuous, but it's actually a big deal because it slows down these mana cheating cards. So if you play them on curve, you can't play the discounted cards until the following turn. And then now if you play them on curve, your opponent's okay, big stuff is going down next turn, I gotta get ready here. Or now you wait to play these mana cheating cards a turn so you could abuse the discount the turn you play them, but then that gives your opponent a chance to close out the game. I know what I'm describing doesn't exactly translate over to Spell Druid cards or Quest Warlock, but I think the impact of actually having to pay mana for a card will still slow these decks down and eliminate some of the frustrating moments. Some people think that all mana cheating cards should just be Hall of Fame, off to the Hall of Fame, and I don't think the devs really want to do that. In fact, I think they really like having these crazy, flashy swing turns in the game, and the change I'm suggesting seems like a nice middle ground to me. It still allows for these crazy swing turns, but it also brings them down in power, which I think we can all agree is very much needed because they're unsatisfying to play against the majority of the time. I also know that like cards like Sorcerer's Apprentice, Farsight, and Skull Gul'dan can reduce cheaper cards to 0 mana. I'm not like entirely sure if those effects are as annoying as the ones I just went through, so I'm not sure if they also need to be addressed. Would love to hear what you guys think about these down in the comments, though, because I feel like as a community we have a lot to say. I know like Sorcerer's Apprentice in particular, it could be like sort of frustrating for quest mage and wild, but like I don't play much wild, so again, just let me know down in the comments what you think. And now we're moving on. I think this next change is long overdue and will probably have to happen eventually, and that is changing Discover cards to not be able to discover themselves. Discover cards being able to discover themselves has always been an annoyance with the Discover mechanic because it allows you to get more value from a Discover card, and also reroll a Discover if you get like a bad pick, and I think both of these are really strong. But recently, I think it's become a lot more frustrating for a couple reasons. The first reason is it just seems like there are more cards than usual that can discover themselves. And I did a quick search of the card gallery. Out of the 37 Discover cards in Standard right now, 11 of them are able to discover themselves at the moment, which seems like a lot to me. That's more than 25% of all the Discover cards in Standard at the moment. Then the second reason, in my opinion, is that we've gotten very cheap Discover spells in the last couple expansions with Arcane Breath and Mage and Renewal and Priest. So it's easier to rediscover these cards multiple times in the same turn and then like do something on top of that. And to me, Renewal really seems like the problem card that is renewing the discussion on whether Discover cards should be able to discover themselves. It just doesn't feel good when your priest opponent is almost dead, then they play Renewal into 1 to 3 additional renewals to like heal themselves back up, and then they Soul Mirror to clear your board. And you know, some might say that hey, maybe they should just nerf Renewal, and I think that's reasonable, but at the same time, it feels like this discovery issue always comes up every once in a while, and then it goes away until like the next self-discovering discovery card comes along that's really annoying. So I think long term, we're better off just not letting Discover cards discover themselves, and I think people would be like overall like relatively happy with that. Okay, now the last change I want to see is admittedly like pretty vague, but I just want Blizzard to do a balance update for the Lackeys. Like, just please do something, Blizzard. The Lackey mechanic, while fun when introduced, has sort of grown over the past year into a very frustrating RNG experience for many players, and it undermines a lot of decision making in games. And I think this is very bad. A lot of people call for the Lackey mechanic to be Hall of Famed, but I think there's a middle ground between like Hall of Faming and then doing nothing, which is what Blizzard is currently doing, and I don't think that's good given that Lackeys are in the game for the rest of next year, and I think rotation's in April, so next April, and it's June of this year, and people are already vocally upset about them. It's not good. They have to do something, in my opinion. The big problem with Lackeys is the amount of variance with not only which Lackey received, but also what that Lackey does or produces. Like, there's a huge difference between getting a Novice Engineer off a Faceless Lackey versus discovering Dragon Queen Alexstrasza off a Draconic Lackey. Basically, like, you know, the example I like to give, they're sort of like the value equivalent of like Implosion or Crackle, and these were like cards from Goblins versus Gnomes, and when you like low rolled these cards, they felt pretty bad, but when you, oh my god, when you high rolled these cards, your opponents just felt miserable. It was just very upsetting RNG experience. And I bring this up because it's generally agreed that this is the type of RNG that people really don't like when there's a huge disparity between the best option and the worst option. And now this brings me into what I'd like to see happen with the Lackey mechanic. First, I would really like to see Blizzard control the pools of what spells or dragons can be discovered off of Ethereal Lackey and Draconic Lackey, and maybe even get rid of some of the high rolly and low rolly 2-drops for Faceless Lackey while they're at it. That's more a personal thing because I've lost too many games to my opponent getting an early Millhouse Mana Storm off of Faceless Lackey, and those situations are just really annoying. But anyways, like removing Dragon Queen Alex or even regular Alexstrasza from the Draconic Lackey Discover pool would go a real long way in making this Lackey far less annoying. I know some people also have grievances with Rogue being able to discover Shadow Step off of Ethereal Lackey to reroll the Lackey or make a big ol' Edwin Van Cleef, so maybe they take Shadow Step out of the Rogue Discover pool, and people stop taking out their Hall of Fame Edwin pitchforks every other week. If I had to guess, the devs probably like don't want to control the Discover pools because I think they want a chance for all like the niche cards to shine and have their moments. That's just what I'm assuming. But if they really want like a card to see play, I think they should just make the cards better. And now for the next Lackey change I'd like to see. This one is admittedly a bit more out there, but right now we have all the Lackeys available at the same time, so there's a lot of variance with which Lackey you get, and I think it would be cool if they were put on a monthly rotation where only 5 are available during a season. I just picked 5 because that was like the original amount when they like first introduced the lackeys. But I think, going down the 4 could be interesting as well. Not only will this lower the variance in like which lackey you receive, so you can better anticipate what your opponent can do, the devs can also make sure that like the very powerful value lackeys, Ethereal Lackey and Draconic Lackey, aren't in rotation at the same time, which I think has given a class like Rogue like way too much value against control decks. Side note, I'm honestly like not trying to dump on Rogue in this video. I actually like really enjoy the class, but it's not fun to play against. But anyways, I think that people are also just like really sick of the lackey mechanic. So I think having like these little rotations will spice things up every month before the mechanic like actually rotates with the first expansion next year. And I'm very doubtful that the devs will Hall of Fame the lackeys like a lot of people have been calling for. But I think this is like a decent middle ground. So like, you might like be really frustrated with the lackeys, but like, hey, at least you don't have to deal with like all of them every month. And going forward, maybe they don't design another mechanic that gets supported for a whole year, especially one with like a lot of randomness. I thought it was a cool idea when they like first announced it in Year of the Dragon, but in practice it gets stale, and that leads to it becoming frustrating. And then I feel compelled to make videos like these. Well, anyways, that's all I got, and I'm sure I probably hit on some things that you hopefully agree with, and probably some stuff you don't agree with, because we're all people with different opinions here. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. Always love to have a discussion on this stuff, and make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more superior Hearthstone content, and it also just really helps me out. And you can also catch me over on Twitch, where I stream every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Link will be down in the description for that, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Later.